Hello and welcome to an ESO build guide. I'm Dying Legacy and this is the Gravedigger build. Stamina Necromancer for solo content. Packing strong damage, AoE and survivability, this Necromancer takes full advantage of its DPS and tanking strengths, making veteran dungeons and arenas easy. This is a quick build guide. We'll be going over the race, attributes, Munda Stones, food, potions, gear skills, passives and champion point slottables. The info will be minimal, so I'll only be going over what's necessary. However, do feel free to comment below if you have any questions, suggestions, or if there's anything I could do better. And why not subscribe and like the video while you're down there? With the intro covered, let's go over the Gravedigger build. Starting with the race, it doesn't really matter what you use, it's an RPG and it's all about creativity and self-enjoyment. You play as you prefer, but if you're looking for suggestions, I would recommend either the Red Guard if you're looking for more sustain, the Khajiit for extra critical damage, or an Orc for extra weapon damage. For the attributes, we're putting 64 points into stamina, and for our Munda Stone, when we're doing solo content, we're taking the Lover Munda Stone for extra spell and physical penetration. When doing content as part of a group, we'll be taking the Thief Munda Stone for that extra critical rating. For our food, we are taking the Artaeum Takeaway Broth to increase our health recovery, max stamina and stamina recovery. You can pick these up at a guild vendor or make it yourself at a cooking station if you have the recipe. This can be rather expensive to get your hands on and to make yourself, in which case the cheaper option is the dubious Cameronian Throne. The stats are slightly lower and it doesn't give health recovery, but it's a very small difference and overall it doesn't matter which one you use. For our potions, we're using the Essence of Weapon Power, which grants us Major Brutality, Major Savagery, Major Endurance, and restores some stamina immediately. We'll be using these for those longer and tougher fights. We can grab these at a guild vendor or make them at an alchemy station. If you haven't got any on you at the time, you can always pop an Essence of Stamina instead. This will give us Major Endurance and restore some stamina immediately. They might not be as useful as Weapon Power potions, but they are better than nothing, and they do happen to drop from almost every mob among Tamriel, so your bag will probably be full of them. Moving on to the gear now, we have the option to use a Maelstrom Greatsword and Payloader Ring on this build. They aren't necessary by any means, and we have options in their stead, which we'll go over first. We are using 7 medium armor pieces on this build, all with the Divine trait and a Stamina enchant. For the jewellery, we are using the Bloodthirsty trait and weapon damage enchants. For our weapons, we are using dual daggers for our front bar. Our main hand will be Nirnhoned with a poison enchant, and our offhand will be a charged trait with a fire enchant. For our back bar, we are taking a two-handed Greatsword with the infused trait and a weapon damage enchant. Moving on to the sets themselves, starting with the body pieces, which are the chest, waist, hands, legs and feet. Our first choice is a trial set, and it's the Arms of Reliquant set. This set is gotten from Cloudrest, and on veteran difficulty you can get a perfected version, which adds extra stamina to the set. It's a minor increase compared to the unperfected version, so it doesn't matter what version you actually use. The set itself gives us critical chance, minor slayer at all times, and our light and heavy attacks add a stacking damage over time effect to our targets that lasts for 5 seconds and stacks up to 10 times. If you haven't stepped into a trial or want to use something else, you can use the Aegis Caller set, which is gotten in the DLC Unhallowed Grave Dungeon. This set adds weapon and spell damage, stamina recovery, and when you do critical damage with a martial melee attack, you'll summon a lesser Aegis for 11 seconds, which will deal bleed damage every 1 second. This effect can occur every 12 seconds. If you're looking for a little more healing, you could also go with Briarheart, which is gotten from Hrothgar overland content, such as dells, world bosses, and public dungeons. You can also pick it up at a guild vendor. Briarheart comes with critical chance and maximum stamina, and when you deal critical damage, your weapon and spell damage increases for 10 seconds, and while the effect is active, you'll heal when you do critical damage. This effect can occur every 15 seconds. For our weapons and jewellery, we are going with the Pillar of Nirn set, which is gotten from the DLC dungeon Valkyrie Hold, which gives us maximum stamina, critical chance, and weapon and spell damage. And when you deal damage, you'll deal bleed damage to the target enemy and enemies near the target, and causing them to take bleed damage for 10 seconds. For our monster sets, for our helm and shoulder slots, we have 2 choices. We can use the Bloodspawn set. The helm can be gotten from Spindleclutch 2 on Veteran, and the shoulders from the Undaunted vendors. This set adds stamina recovery, and when we take damage, we have a small chance to gain extra ultimate and to increase our resistance by 3601 for 5 seconds. Another good choice is the Stormfist set from Tempest Island on Veteran. Again, the helm from Veteran difficulty, and the shoulder from an Undaunted vendor. Stormfist adds stamina recovery, and when you deal damage, you have a chance to summon a fist to close around the enemy, dealing shock damage every 1 second for 3 seconds to all enemies within 4 meters. When the fist closes, it does a large amount of physical damage extra. Now for the Ring of the Pale Order, which is gotten from the Antiquity system. When using this, we will heal for 20% of all the damage we do. We can't be healed by anyone but ourselves, and the healing we do decreases when we're in creeps. The ring will take up a ring slot, obviously, so we'll need to wear our jewellery set on either our shoulder or helm. The slot doesn't really matter. We will lose our 2-set bonus from our monster set, but the payload or ring makes up for it. You can stick with the Blood Spawn or Stormfist for the 1-piece bonus, or you could also use the Magma Incarnate set. The head is found in the Dreadcellar DLC dungeon on Veteran, and the shoulder from the Undaunted vendor. Magma Incarnate's 1-set bonus will give us magic and stamina recovery, which is very handy for our sustain. Lastly is the Maelstrom 2-handed sword, which is gotten from the Maelstrom Arena, and we'll be using this in our back bar. There's a perfected version from Veteran difficulty which adds extra offensive penetration. Doesn't matter which version we use, as we are more interested in the base effect, which is when dealing damage with critical charge, we can cause enemies to bleed for over 10 seconds. That covers the gear, and now it's time for the skills, starting with the front bar. First skill up is Blood Craze. Morph this from Twin Slashes found in the Dual Wield skill line. This will deal bleed damage and cause the enemy to bleed for 20 seconds and heals you over its duration. On to Deadly Cloak next, morphed from Blade Cloak and found in the Dual Wield skill line. You'll envelop yourself in a cloak of razors, gaining major evasion for 20 seconds, and every 2 seconds the shrapnel will pulse, dealing physical damage to enemies within 5 meters. We're also using Barbed Trap, morphed from Trap Beast, and can be found in the Fighter's Guild skill line. The trap deals bleed damage and causes the enemy to bleed for 20 seconds and grants you major force, and it can immobilize enemies for 2 seconds as well when it's triggered. Next is Blighted Blast Bones, morphed from Blast Bones and found in the Gravelord skill line. Summon a skeleton that runs after the target and explodes, dealing disease damage to all enemies nearby, which also applies Major Defile. This creates a corpse on death. We are also using Detonating Siphon, morphed from Shocking Siphon, which is found in the Gravelord skill line. This drains the remaining life from a corpse, dealing disease damage over 20 seconds to all enemies around the corpse and between you and the corpse. When the siphon ends, the corpse explodes, dealing additional disease damage to the enemies nearby. And while slotted, your damage done is increased by 3%. For the ultimate on the front bar, we're using Flawless Dawnbreaker, morphed from Dawnbreaker and found in the Fighter's Guild skill line. You'll deal physical damage to enemies in front of you and additional physical damage over 6 seconds. And after activating, you'll increase your weapon and spell damage by 300 for 20 seconds. Next, we'll move on to our back bar skills, and first up is Stampede, morphed from Critical Charge, which is found in the 2-handed skill line. You'll charge an enemy and deal physical damage to them and nearby enemies. This is always a critical strike. You'll also leave an AoE under their feet for 15 seconds that deals physical damage. And if you happen to be using the Maelstrom Greatsword, you'll also add bleed damage to those enemies hit. Next is Carve, which is morphed from Cleave, which is found in the 2-handed skill line. You'll deal bleed damage to the enemies in front of you and cause them to bleed for 12 seconds. Hitting an enemy again will increase the duration up to 32 seconds. This also gives us a damage shield. We're also using Beckoning Armor, morphed from Bone Armor and found in the Bone Tyrant skill line. This will give us major resolve for 20 seconds, and while active, an enemy that attacks from ranged will be pulled to you. This also creates a corpse when the effect ends. On to Unnerving Boneyard next, morphed from Boneyard and found in the Gravelord skill line. Deals frost damage at the target location for 10 seconds and applying major breach to enemies within. This can consume a corpse on cast to deal 30% more damage, and an ally standing in the graveyard can activate the Grave Robber synergy, dealing frost damage to enemies in the area and healing for the damage done. We're also using Intensive Mender, morphed from Spirit Mender and found in the Living Death skill line. Conjure a ghost to heal you or the lowest health ally every 2 seconds over 8 seconds. This also creates a corpse on death. The ultimate on the back bar is Pestilent Colossus, morphed from Frozen Colossus and found in the Gravelord skill line. The Colossus will pulverize enemies in the area, smashing the ground 3 times over 3 seconds, dealing increased disease damage with the first, second and third smash. Dealing damage applies major vulnerability, increasing damage taken by 10%. That covers all the skills, so let's quickly go over the passives, starting with our class passives. First up is the Gravelord skill line. We want to take everything in here, which includes reusable parts, Detonel, Dismember and Rapid Rot. In the Bone Tyrant skill line, we want to take everything in here as well, so take Death Gleaning, Disdain Harm, Health Avarice and Last Grasp. And in the Living Death skill line, we also want to take everything, so we'll be taking Curative Curse, Near Death Experience, Corpse Consumption and Undead Confederate. We are using Dual Daggers, so we'll take everything in the Dual Wield skill line. These are Slaughter, Dual Wield Expert, Controlled Fury, Ruffian and Twin Blade and Blunt. Next is the 2-handed skill line. Again, we'll take everything. This includes Forceful, Heavy Weapons, Balanced Blade, Follow-Up and Battle Rush. We are wearing full medium armor, so we'll take everything again in this skill line, which are Dexterity, Windwalker, Improved Sneak, Agility and Athletics. Next up is the guild passive, starting with the Fighter's Guild. In here we'll be taking Intimidating Presence, Slayer, Banish the Wicked and Skill Tracker. And next up is the Undaunted passives. In here we'll be taking Undaunted Command and Undaunted Metal. This next passive is optional and can be found in the Assault skill line, and it's Continuous Attack. We only need 1 point in this to get Major Gallop. We get nothing extra for adding a second point unless you do plan on doing something like Cyrodiil or PvP. Moving on to the racial passives, these are specific to your race. But you do need to grab everything, have a quick read over them so you know what they do and understand what benefits and advantages you have, as every race has their own passives that can be beneficial to your style of play. I have the suggestions on screen as we speak. And lastly, one more optional passive which I would class as necessary, and it's medicinal use, which is found in the alchemy skill line. This causes our potions to last much longer and makes potions outlast their cooldown, so you can always have a potion active. And that covers the passives, and now onto the champion point solubles, beginning in the warfare tree. In the Warfare tree, we want to grab Wrathful Strikes to increase spell damage and weapon damage. We also want to take Fighting Finesse to increase our critical damage and critical healing done. We also want to take Deadly Aim to increase damage done with single target attacks. And we also want to take Thaumaturge to increase our damage done with damage over time effects. In the Fitness tree skill line, we want to take Boundless Vitality to increase our health, Fortified to increase our armor. We want to take Rejuvenation to increase our overall sustain. And we also want to take Bloody Renewal to increase the stamina we get back after we kill an enemy. And lastly, in the craft skill line, in here you can realistically take whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. You've got things for crafting and stealing. You know, take whatever you think is best for you, or, you know, whatever adds a bit of enjoyment to your gameplay. But for myself, when doing solo play, I like to take Treasure Hunter to increase the quality of items I find in chests. I also like to take Rationeer to add a couple of extra minutes onto my food. I like to take Liquid Efficiency just so whenever I use a potion or a poison, I have a slight chance not to actually consume it. And I like to take Steed's Blessing just to increase our out of combat movement speed as well, just to make it handier to get around the map. But that's everything for the champion point solubles. And it's also everything for the Gravedigger build. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope this was helpful or gave you some ideas for your own builds, and if it did, why not like and subscribe? It helps me a lot and I appreciate the support, and thank you so much to those who already have. Plus, I try to do an MMO guide once a week. So far, we jump between ESO builds and Final Fantasy XIV guides, and it'll help you stay in the loop. If you have any thoughts, suggestions, recommendations, or just want to have a chat, comment below. You can also find me over on Twitch at twitch.tv/dyinglegacy, where we mostly play MMOs and chat. I also have a Twitter and Instagram that I plan to start using a whole lot more to try out this whole people thing. You can find those in the description. But that's the video. Thanks again, guys. You've been fantastic. I've been Dying Legacy, and until next time, stay awesome.